Welcome to all my subscribers and welcome to everybody around the world. So today is a very important video. It's a very important video because irregardless of when the end days do come, I believe it's next year, but irregardless of when they do come, the question here today, which I'm going to give a solid answer for with plenty of verses to prove it for everybody to see. The thing we're here to discuss today is, can we or can we not calculate to some degree and to some extent as to when the end days will arrive? Of course, only using what God gave us in the Bible, of course, right? Can we calculate it to some extent, or is it impossible? If you were to go around and ask 1,000,000 Christians today, okay, probably 99% of them, every last one except for maybe a few, would say that you cannot know when the end will come. So many churches and denominations teach that nobody, not even the angels, nobody will know when the end is. Only God knows. So I'm here to clear up this matter once and for all. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to give my opinion. I'm going to read all the verses, and you and I can see for ourselves what is the reality here. Okay, because if God did make us able to know or to calculate it, he would say so. And I've got verses for that. If there are verses that say we cannot know or calculate, then I'll read such verses as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the negative verses, the verses that all those other Christians, all the churches use to convince people that they cannot know when the end is coming. Okay? So I'll start off with those negative verses first, and then I'll go and read the positive verses, the verses that show actually no, God does allow us to, but not only that, he might even expect us to use this bit of intelligence and to process the numbers that he gave, and therefore calculate the arrival of the end days to some extent. I'm not saying we're going to know the day or hour. I never have said that. So what I'll do, like I said, is I'll start off with the negative verses. These are the verses that, and there's only a few of them, that appear to say we cannot know when the end is. Okay? Now, and remember the chapters, the New Testament books that I'm reading from when I read these next few negative verses, because that is very important. When I go read the positive verses, you will see just how correct I am. Okay? These following negative verses are the only verses that exist in the New Testament, and they are the only verses that any Christian could use to try and claim that we cannot know the end. There are simply no other verses. I spent the last few hours once again researching every instance of key terms in the New Testament and even the whole Bible, such as day, hour, time, know, understand, this and that there, to try and break it down on the deepest level possible. Okay, so these are the negative verses from Matthew 24. Remember that, okay? From Matthew 24:36, the famous verse concerning that day and the hour no one has known. And let me just stress this again. There is one of my viewers who tried to take the message of, the imminent end days to some churches or church leaders, and the church leaders essentially shot down his efforts and threw Acts chapter 1 at him, verse 7, which is I'm going to read in a second. Okay? Now, I'm drawing reference to that because, A, I appreciate that this individual is trying to help spread the word, but also I'm making this video here today because, that example of what happened with that individual, he's trying to spread the awareness. People are shooting him down saying, no, you cannot know when the end is. That person's a false prophet. They're deluding you or whatever. This negative and erroneous and incorrect mindset needs to be corrected. Okay? Because quite simply, as I will have proven by the end of this video, I'm almost sure that God expects us to calculate. And I don't mean the day or the hour, but at least the year or years that it will be happening. He wants us to watch and be ready. And trust me, there are lots of verses that will back this up. But anyways, this message needs to be taken. This message in this video needs to be taken to all the churches. All the Christian ministers, leaders, and teachers and everybody have to hear this video, this message in these verses, because none of this will be my opinion. I'm not going to be using my opinion as any evidence. The churches have to hear this. Once they understand and have learned from it, they can see that God wants us to know. Once you put the digits in the calculator that he gave us in the book of Daniel, it will point to 2023, as I've shown and talked about in all my other hours and hours of videos. Okay, but I'm not here to argue about when the end is coming, just whether God wants us to know, whether we can know to some extent when it will be arriving. Okay, so in Matthew 24:36, this message has to get out to every church. Okay, so in Matthew 24:36, and concerning that day and the hour, no one has known, not even the messengers of the heavens, except my Father only. So that sounds like, oh yeah, no one will know when it comes, but it only says the day or the hour. Okay, now in Matthew 24:42, same chapter. Watch ye therefore, because ye have not known in what hour your Lord does come. So again, it doesn't say the year or anything like that. It just says the hour. Okay. In Matthew 24, verse 50, the Lord of that servant will arrive in a day when he does not expect, and in an hour of which he does not know. So the same thing again in the same chapter. There's actually a twist to that one there when I read the positive verses. A shocking twist, but I'll leave it at that for now, for simplicity's sake. Now in Matthew 25:13, so the same author, very next chapter, watch therefore, for ye have not known the day or the hour in which the Son of Man does come. So far in all these verses, it's just the day or the hour we won't be able to know. Okay? There's no argument over that. We cannot know the day or the hour based on what the Bible says. In Mark 13, so remember this next chapter. So remember Matthew 24, because I have positive verses to read from Matthew 24. Next one here is Mark 13. Again, I have positive verses for this one too, from Mark 13. But I'll read the negative verses from Mark 13 first. In Mark 13:32, it says the same thing we just heard. And concerning that day and hour, no one has known, not even the messengers who are in the heaven, not even the Son, except the Father. Okay? So again, the day and the hour, we won't know. Just like we heard 4 times already. In Luke 12:39, in this know that if the master of the house, in this scenario, in this parable, that is referencing Satan, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief represents Jesus in this scenario, does come, he would have watched, would not have suffered his house to be broken through. So that could be actual reason why nobody will know the day or the hour, not even Jesus, because that way Satan won't be able to prepare for the day and hour when Jesus will come. But nonetheless, in Luke 12, so we've gone on from Matthew 24, remember that. Mark 13, remember that. And now we're going to Luke 12, remember that. 3 penultimate gospels that seem to say in those negative verses that you cannot know when the end arrives. But just the day or the hour. But in general, you cannot know when the end arrives. Okay? Just wait till I read the positive verses from the very same chapters. Okay, but I'll get to that later. Right, so in Luke 12:46, the Lord of that servant will come in a day in which he does not look for him, and in an hour that he does not know, and will cut him off, and his portion with the unfaithful he will appoint. Now those are actually when you search for the terms know and hour, those are the only negative ones that occur. Okay? There are no other negatives. The only other negative verse that exists in the Bible, even just the New Testament, but the Bible, the only other one is from Acts chapter 1, verse 7. And this is the one that Christian minister, whoever he was, threw back at one of my viewers to try and crush his efforts. Okay? So in Acts 1:7, what does it say? Well, let's read from verse 6 for a little context. The disciples are questioning Jesus about something very, very important that every Jewish person, because the disciples are all Jews, every Jewish person was expecting the restoration of Israel, the ingathering of the exiles. This is what was promised through all the prophets of the Old Testament. Okay? So in verse 6, they therefore indeed, having come together, were questioning him, Jesus, saying, Lord, dost thou at this time restore the reign to Israel? Because Rome was ruling it at the time. Okay? So they asked, does thou at this time restore the reign to Israel? And what does Jesus say? Verse 7, and he said unto them, it is not yours to know the times or seasons that the Father did appoint in his own authority. Now that does, if you only heard the Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 12 negative verses, and this Acts 1:7 verse, you might think, oh yeah, of course, there's no way anybody can know when the end is, because it really appears right here. Jesus says it's not yours to know the times or seasons that the Father did appoint in his own authority. It really seems to sound like that. But guess what? When I read the following a dozen or more positive verses, you will see the complete opposite being said. Now, it's not that the Bible contradicts itself. Remember, in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 12, it only ever said in each one of the verses that you cannot know the day or the hour. It never said we couldn't calculate at least the year that the end would arrive. Okay, remember that. This one here in Acts 1:7 is the only other negative verse, and it does actually appear to say something quite shocking. It's not yours to know times or seasons that the Father did appoint in his own authority. Now, I will admit, when you read that, it seems like, yeah, gosh, that's a hard one to swallow. It goes in face of what I'm trying to claim. But they did specifically ask Jesus if he would restore Israel at that time. So you can't ignore that. This was something that was specific. They asked Jesus, would you be restoring Israel at this time? They weren't asking Jesus, when will the end of days come? It was something specific that Jesus made a response to. But, admittedly, in his response, he says it's not yours to know times or seasons that the Father did appoint in his own authority. So, now we all know that God is not a hypocrite. We know that he is not a liar. We know that he doesn't contradict himself. So when I go and read the following shocking verses from the very same Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 12, and from many other sources in the Old and New Testament, you will see that quite clearly we can and we're even expected to know times and seasons appointed by God. Now, we have to trust that God doesn't contradict himself. So by the time I finish reading these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 verses, you'll have to factor in that there are 12 verses here basically saying that yes, we can and should know the time. And then we'll have one verse, Acts 1:7, that appears to say we can't. At that point there, you should reflect on what I had just mentioned, that in light of all these other verses, we have this one here. Trusting that God does not contradict himself, what does logic lend to be the solution? The solution is that 12 is greater than 1. We are therefore not understanding what was meant by that one verse, the one negative, when clearly we can see what is meant in the 12 positive verses. Okay, 1 will not outweigh 12. The 12 that I will read will outweigh that 1. We know that God is not a liar. Okay, therefore, I think it's justified to say that Jesus' response there was specifically tailored to the exact question that they had asked. And it was not a blanket universal statement that one could apply to anything such as, can we know or calculate the end day's arrival? Because at the end of the day, if Daniel had not requested numbers from God, and if God had not given Daniel numbers and instructed him to calculate with them for the end days, I would not be here, and I don't think many other people would be here trying to claim that they know when the end might be coming. The only reason I think it's 2023 is exclusively because of the prophecy of Daniel. And it's only because of the numbers that God gave. So I want to start off, before I read these 12 positive verses, I want to start off with a little simple parable that'll put everything into context here. Okay? So instead of thinking about Daniel and Babylon and all these confusing things and angels, let's make it dead easy. Most people have been to school, okay? In school, or in college even, you go to classes for a few months, and then at the end of the term or semester, you have a final exam, okay? So in the book of Daniel, where God is saying, I'm going to make this bad thing happen to Israel, this bad thing happen to Israel, there's going to be desolation, you're going to be conquered, the temple the temple will fall. All these things are laid out. These are like all the lessons that will be learned. Okay? All the punishments, and what do punishments do? They make you learn lessons from them. That's why you receive the punishment, so you can learn a lesson. So in this parable, we're going to translate, instead of using it in that Daniel context of Babylon and angels and all this, we're going to simplify, put it into a different light for people to be able to more easily understand. Okay, you're a student, you're going to school, and you go up to the teacher and you ask the teacher, for how long will we be having these lessons for? And the teacher answers you and says, for 3.5 months, you're going to have these classes in which you will learn the lessons. And then you, the student, will ask, okay, well, that's when all the lessons have finished, but what about the final exam at the latter end? When does that happen? And then the teacher turns back and says, okay, it was 3.5 months for the lessons, but the final exam is going to be at an additional blah, 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 a number. In this simple context, we can see that this is exactly what happened with Daniel. Daniel in chapter 12, which I'm going to say for last to read out of the 12 proof verses. Well, maybe I should read it first, but it's the longest, so I'm going to save it for last. Daniel literally asks God, how long to the end of these things that I saw afflicting Israel? And God said 3.5 times. That's like the student asking his teacher, for how long will we have these lessons? And the teacher says, for 3.5 months. And then Daniel knew that at the end of the 3.5 times, it wouldn't be the very end. So he asked God then, what is the latter end of these? And God responds, oh, well, at the 1335th is the end. And if you make it to this point, you're blessed. Okay? So God directly answered him. In the student context, the student then, like I said, asked the teacher, okay, well, after the lessons are done, when is the final exam? And the teacher tells him the final exam is at this point. Now, it's very important in the context of a student at school to know how long the lessons are going to go on for and when the final exam will be. You don't want to miss the final exam. And if you ask the teacher as a student, teacher, when is the final exam? And if the teacher tells you it's after X number of days, it's up to you as a student to remember what the teacher said and apply it and utilize it. So when Daniel asked God, how long will the lessons go on for, and how much longer after the lessons are finished until the end, if God gives Daniel an answer with numbers, then it is up to Daniel, it is up to all of us to understand those numbers, to calculate with those numbers. That's why God gave them to us. We want to know when the final exam is. And God told Daniel. So for any Christian to say we can't know that when the end will come, then why on earth did God answer Daniel there? Why wouldn't God have told Daniel, Daniel, it's not for you to know when those things will happen. You cannot know. Nobody will ever know. Is God a liar? Is God a hypocrite? God told Daniel the numbers. And they match up with all these points in history, as proven in my other videos, but I'm not even going to touch on that topic today to save time. Okay? So why would God give Daniel the calculations if he didn't want Daniel or expect Daniel to use them? But more, that's a little logical analysis there. Let's go read these positive verses. Okay, but before I do, I'm just going to read Acts 1:7 again. And, well, from verse 6. They therefore indeed, having come together, are questioning Jesus, saying, Lord, at this time are you going to restore the reign to Israel? And Jesus said to them, it's not yours to know times or seasons that the Father did appoint in his own authority. Now here's the positive verses. In Luke 12, verse 56, hypocrites, the face of the earth and of the heaven ye have known to make proof of, but this time, how do you not make proof of it? This is Jesus calling the disciples hypocrites because they couldn't understand the times. And here we have Jesus in Acts 1:7 appearing to say that it's not yours to know times or seasons. Do you see what I mean? Once I've finished reading all these 12 verses and factoring in that God is not a hypocrite or a liar himself, and he does not contradict himself, you have to admit as a lowly human that you have been misapplying Acts 1:7 to suggest that you cannot know when the end is coming. You cannot know the times appointed by God. Of course you can know the times appointed by God. These following verses prove it. So again, Luke 12:56, hypocrites, the face of the earth and of the heaven ye have known to make proof of. But this time, how do you not make proof of it? In Job 24, verse 1, wherefore from the mighty one times have not been hidden. From Daniel 8, verse 19, and saith, Lo, I am causing thee to know that which is in the latter end of the indignation, for at the appointed time is the end. In Romans 13:11, in this, knowing the time, that for us the hour is already to be aroused out of sleep, for now is nearer our salvation than when we did believe. Again, knowing the time, it literally says that, knowing the time. And in Daniel 8, it says, I'm causing thee to know that which is the latter end. Okay? And in Luke 12, Jesus is saying, how can you not make proof of the times? Clearly, just from these three verses, we can see that we can know the times that God has appointed. Okay? So, now we get over to Mark 13. So remember, from Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 12, these were the three chapters that appear to say that you can't know the day or the hour. Okay, but again, no mention of you can't know the year, but they say you can't know the day or hour. And Christians use these verses as some form of evidence, right? But here we go. Mark 13. This is the chapter that contains that negative verse. But once I read the fullness, you will see that that negative verse has been read out of context without understanding of the greater whole, and therefore it's not actually a negative verse. It's being wrongly used and presented as a negative verse. Okay, so in Mark 13, you tell me, once I read this, can we know times or not? Right? Jesus tells them. The disciples have asked Jesus, how do we know when the end has come? Remember that. In Matthew 24, in Mark 13, and Luke 12, the scenario in each of these is identically the same. And the disciples are literally asking Jesus when and how they can know when the end will come. It doesn't get much more relevant to this topic than that reality, okay? So Jesus' response includes the following in verse 28. And from the fig tree learn ye the simile. When the branch may already become tender and may put forth the leaves, ye know that nigh is the summer. So Jesus right there is not only saying that people are able to know when the times and seasons of God will appear, but he's also giving us a clue and telling us a clue of what to recognize to therefore understand the time and season that God has appointed. You follow me? So in Acts 1:7, Jesus appears to say it's not yours to know times or seasons that the Father did appoint in his own authority. I think that's applying to what the disciples asked him. Are you restoring Israel at this time? Jesus specifically responded to that specific point. It said it's not yours to know. But Christians are out here using that one verse here, saying that nobody can know when the end will come, right? But here we have, in Mark 13, Jesus telling us that we can know times and seasons and giving us a clue as to how we can further calculate it, okay? Right? When the branch may already become tender, may put forth the leaves, ye know that nigh is the summer. So ye also, when these ye may see coming to pass, ye know that it is nigh at the doors. In 2 verses later is where it says, and concerning that day and hour nobody has known. But then in the following verse 33 it says, take heed, watch and pray. Okay, you can't watch for 2,000 years. When you look at this, it's quite obvious. Those preceding positive verses negate that negative verse. There is no negative verse there. The only negative aspect is you can't know the day or hour. But Jesus clearly just said 2 verses prior that you can know time and seasons, and gave us a clue to how we can further understand. So if we go over to Luke 12 next, Luke 21. Same thing, same scenario. Verse 29. And he spake a simile to them. See the fig tree and all the trees. When they may now cast forth, having seen of yourselves, ye know that now is the summer nigh. So apparently Jesus once again is saying we can know times and seasons. So also ye, when ye may see these things happening, ye know that near is the reign of God. And next in Matthew 24, verse 32, and from the fig tree learn ye the simile. When already its branch may have become tender, and the leaves ye may put forth, ye know that summer is nigh. So also ye, when ye may see all these, ye know that it is nigh, at the doors. And then 2 verses later, concerning that day and hour, known is known. Now the ironic twist here is the following. This is what Christian churches won't admit. In all of these chapters that I just read, okay, so from Mark 13, Luke 21, I think there's also Luke 12, well, in either case, maybe I spoonerized it. And in Matthew 24, in these 3 primary Gospels, where it says you can't know the day or the hour, but in each, Jesus says you can know the time and the season, and gave us clues how to recognize the time of the end, right? In all of these verses, in all of these chapters, it says the following. This is one example, okay? Right after saying the day and hour you can't know, in verse 33, I'm going to read on from there. Take heed, this is from Mark 13, take heed, watch and pray, for ye have not known when the time is. As a man who has gone abroad, Jesus, having left his house and given to his servants the authority, and to each one his work, did command also the porter that he may watch. Watch ye therefore, for ye have not known when the Lord of the house does come, at evening, or at midnight, or at cock crowing, or at the morning, lest having come suddenly he may find you sleeping. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch. Now, each of these 3 Gospels stylizes this in a different way. In this one here, it's saying that we should watch and pay attention. You cannot watch for the arrival of Jesus unless you roughly know when he is going to arrive. It's like saying you're at the airport. You're going to watch for the flight where your friend is flying in on. If you don't know what day, if you don't know when the flight's coming in on, just in general, you have no clue. You don't even know the year that he's flying in. How are you going to know? Except that we won't know the day or the hour, right? You don't know the year, you don't know the month, you don't know the week, you don't know anything. How are you going to be at the airport waiting to pick up your friend when you have no clue when the flight is coming? Okay? But if you have some idea, at least like, okay, I know that this flight is going to come next year, at least that's something, because otherwise there's 2,000 years that he's telling us to watch for. Okay, so when he says watch, that is highly suggestive. Watch for what? Watch for when the flight is arriving. Okay? But what he says here is that watch therefore, for ye have not known when the Lord of the house does come. He doesn't mention you won't know what year or anything like that there. He just says at evening or midnight or cock crowing or at the morning. He's specifying the hour. So again, he's just stressing that nobody will know the hour and also day that it will happen. Nothing about you can't know the year. Okay, so that's Mark 13 from top to bottom. The one little sentence where it says you can't know the day or the hour is supplemented by many other verses that I just read that show that you can know the time and the season. We should be watching for his arrival. We just won't know what time of the day, and therefore even the day that it will happen. And he finishes off the chapter saying, and what I say to you, I say to all, watch. Okay, so now let's go over to Luke 21. You know what? There are 2 different ones. So I have to go over to Luke 12. One sec. Thought I had this open somewhere else. Oh, I do. It's the first one. Okay. So we go over to Luke 12. Is it? Oh, that's why it was higher up. Yes. So in Luke 12, okay, it says here, in verse 40, and then become ye ready, because at the hour ye think not, the Son of Man does come. Okay, so again, we just have reference. Starting off here, we just have reference. We won't know the hour. Okay? And then Peter said to him, Sir, unto us this simile do you speak, or unto everybody? Right? Now listen here from verse 42. And the Lord said, Who then is the faithful and prudent steward, whom the Lord shall set over his household to give it in season the wheat measure? Happy that servant, whom his Lord, having come, shall find doing so. Truly I say to you, over all his goods he will set him. And if that servant may say in his heart, My Lord does delay to come, this would be in the case of somebody saying, we don't know when the end day, when the end days are. We have no clue when they are. It's just a big question mark. So he's just delaying to come, right? My Lord does delay to come, and may begin to beat the men servants, the maid servants, to eat and to drink and to be drunken. The Lord of that servant will come in a day in which he does not look for him, and in an hour that he does not know, and will cut him off, and his portion with the unfaithful he will appoint. So what that is actually telling you is that you have somebody who's watching and ready for the arrival. There's even another verse I don't have ready here, but I have covered in another related video, where Jesus wants us to be watching and ready to immediately let him in when he comes knocking, right? You could only immediately let him in if you know at least roughly when he is coming, okay? But Jesus blatantly says here in Luke 12, okay, that if you're sitting here saying in your heart, my Lord is delaying to come, I don't know when he's coming, he's just taking forever and he's not here yet, and you're sinning, those people, Jesus will come like a thief and catch them unawares. But what that is also telling you is those who are ready and watching and not doing the naughty things, they will not be caught by surprise. That's the shocking thing here. And Jesus reinforces this elsewhere in Revelation 3:3. He says, remember then, when he gives a warning of edict to the churches, he says, remember then how thou hast received and heard, and be keeping and reform. If then thou mayest not watch, I will come upon thee as a thief, and thou mayest not know what hour I will come upon thee. So Jesus is saying, if you don't watch, I will come upon you like a thief and catch you by surprise. That tells you that if you do watch for his arrival, because you know roughly when it's going to happen, you won't be caught by surprise. Because 2,000 years have gone by. He hasn't come yet. But if you know roughly when he's coming, if he is coming in 2023, that we are watching in 2023, we won't be caught by surprise. If we have no clue when he's coming at all, we will by default be caught by surprise. But Jesus told us to watch. Okay? If then thou mayest not watch, I will come upon thee as a thief, and thou mayest not know what hour I will come upon thee. So again in Luke 12, and if that servant may say in his heart, my Lord does delay to come, and may begin to sin, the Lord of that servant will come in a day in which he does not look for him, in an hour he does not know. And again, in Job 24:1, wherefore from the mighty one times have not been hidden. Again from Daniel 8, lo, I'm causing thee to know that which is in the latter end of the indignation, for at the appointed time is the end. And in Romans 13, and this, knowing the time, that it's for us, the hour already is to be aroused out of sleep, for now nearer is our salvation than we already did believe. Now we go over to a new one in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Little youths, it is the last hour. And even as ye heard that the Antichrist does come, even now Antichrists have become many, whence we know that it is the last hour. This is them knowing times and seasons appointed by God once again. Thank you. Okay? Now, in Matthew 24, we see a parallel to Luke 12 that I just read. In verse 48, and if that evil servant may say in his heart, my Lord does delay to come, and may begin to beat the fellow servants and eat and to drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant will arrive in a day when he does not expect, and catch him by surprise, and in an hour of which he does not know, and will cut him off, and his portion with the hypocrites will appoint. Jesus just used that word earlier, saying hypocrites to those people who couldn't discern the times and seasons of God. Remember that. Now in Jeremiah 8, verse 7, God says even the animals know the times and seasons of God. He says even a stork in the heavens has known her seasons, and turtles and swallows and cranes have watched the time of their coming, and my people have not known the judgment of God. So even the animals know the times. Okay? In Matthew 16, this was the verse, and at morning foul weather today, for the heaven is red, gloomy. Hypocrites, the face of the heavens indeed ye do know to discern, but the signs of the times ye are not able. Ye are not able. When you look at the Greek original text for this, the term ye are not able is almost used as a sarcastic euphemism. Is Jesus saying you're not able to discern the signs of the times? That's why he said in the other verse, you're hypocrites because you couldn't discern the signs of the times. He had that other verse where he said, how are you not able? Okay? He literally had, one of the first verses I read, how are you not able to know? Okay? So, most importantly, we're going to end here on Daniel 12. Okay? Now, this is what God says to Daniel here. This is God giving Daniel the numbers with which to calculate when the end will come. Okay? Now he says, and thou, O Daniel, hide the things and seal the book with all the information that he just gave him till the time of the end. Now God just told us therefore that the book will be sealed and nobody will understand it, but they will when the end is come. Because that's what he just said. Seal the book till the time of the end. Many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. That is showing us that when the time of the end is arriving, that people will be able to understand the knowledge, the numbers, the prophecy that God gave Daniel, and knowledge will be multiplied. So for any Christian to say you can't know or calculate what God gave to Daniel, that is not correct. That is not what God said. God said that it would be understood in the end. Okay? And as I showed in my other videos, without getting into any of that subject matter, I provided a 100% logical reason why nobody will be able to calculate or make sense of Daniel's prophecy until well after 1948, because only at 1948 was the 1260-year period culminated, from the Dome of the Rock in 688 to the rebirth of Israel in 1948, a perfect match of 1260 years. At 688, when the Dome of the Rock was instilled, that was the fullness, the completion of the scattering of the holy people. And then at 1260 years later, in 1948, was the rebirth of Israel, and the Jews and the Christians repatriated back to Israel. Perfect fulfillment, right? So nobody before 1948 would be able to make any sense of Daniel's numbers until after 1948. And then you would be in the last generation. That's absolutely it. But God and Daniel say right here, Daniel, hide the things and seal the book until the time of the end. Many do go to and fro, which means many will go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. Knowledge will be multiplied. Okay? And this is where I gave the student-teacher example, where the student asks the teacher, for how long will we have lessons for? The teacher says, for 3.5 months. And then the student says, yeah, but when is the final exam after that? And the teacher says, it'll be at this certain time. He even says the number of the day, okay? Which in this case would be the year, because it's day for a year, right? So this is the prophecy. Daniel is literally asking God for numbers, and God gave him numbers. So for anybody to say, we can't know, we can't calculate, that is erroneous, okay? So Daniel in verse 6 says, till when is the end of these wonders? The wonders is everything that he has just been shown all the way up until that point, which is Israel being smitten, being conquered, the temple being destroyed, the temple sacrifices being, taken away, the scattering of the holy people, all those things, and finally the abomination being built on the Temple Mount, all these terrible things, and much more even. Till when is the end of these wonders? So when will all of these hard punishments and lessons be over for Israel? How long will these lessons be for, O teacher? And the teacher says, you're going to have these lessons for 3.5 months, right? So Daniel asks, till when is the end of these wonders? And the angel replies, after a time, times and a half, after 3.5 times. So the teacher says, after 3.5 months, right? And after the completion of the scattering of the power of the holy people. The exile was not completed in 70 AD. It was only completed when Islam conquered Israel and put the Dome of the Rock upon the Temple Mount and caused everybody to flee. Go read what ancient historians of the time said. When they saw that temple being built on the Temple Mount, they said, truly, this is the abomination that Daniel warned about. And they all fled. Don't believe me? Go look at what the historians said back at the time. Okay, so Daniel asked, till when is the end of these wonders? Now, is God a liar? Yeah, Daniel's the student, and the student asks the teacher, teacher, for how long will we have these classes for? Is the teacher going to tell him 3.5 times when the student can't know for how long the lessons will go on for? Wouldn't God answer him, Daniel, it's not for you to know how long the lessons will go on for. But did God say that? No. God gave him numbers. Right? And then Daniel says in verse 8, what is the latter end of these? So when is the final exam? And God says in verse 9, go, Daniel, for hidden and sealed are the things until the time of the end. Purify themselves, yea, make themselves white, yea, refined are many, and the wicked have done wickedly, and none of the wicked understand. Understand what? Everything they're talking about. The wicked will not understand when the end is coming. They will be caught unawares because they're too busy beating their chest saying, my Lord delays to come. They're too busy doing the sins at the same time. They don't understand Daniel's prophecy. They're hypocrites. They don't know the times or seasons appointed by God. They don't understand. The wicked have done wickedly, and none of the wicked understand, and those acting wisely do understand. Understand what? The times that God has just told us about. And then he says in the next sentence, and from the time of the turning aside of the perpetual sacrifice into the giving out of the desolating abomination are days 1,290. And again, Daniel was asked for numbers. God gave him numbers, and these numbers fit perfectly with history. In 602 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar took away the temple sacrifice, took away the temple implements, so that the sacrifices couldn't even be done, 1,290 years later is exactly when the Dome of the Rock was built on the Temple Mount. 1,290 years later. Okay? So did God give Daniel this number because God is a liar? Because the number is fake and imaginary? Why would God give a number when we can't know the numbers? When the numbers are unknowable? If we can't know when, how is when defined? How is time defined? But by numbers. God gave us the numbers. How could anybody say we can't know when? Right? And God says in verse 12, with the blessedness of him who is waiting earnestly. How do you wait? How do you wait for your final exam? If you know your final exam is on December 20th, and you're waiting for that final exam, that makes sense. If you don't know when the final exam is, how are you really waiting for that date? How can you wait for your dentist appointment if you don't know when your dentist appointment is? How can you wait for your flight arrival at the airport when you don't know when the flight is arriving? How can you know these things? How can you go outside and wait for the taxi when you don't know when the taxi is going to come to pick you up? But God says, oh, the blessedness of him who is waiting earnestly and has come to the days of 1,335. So God is literally saying, blessed is he who is waiting until the 1,335th. That's showing you that God expects us to calculate with the numbers that he just gave Daniel. He expects us to. Blessed is he who is waiting earnestly, but the wicked will not understand. Blessed is he who is waiting earnestly. Like Jesus said, watch, or else I'm going to catch you by surprise. And God says, wait earnestly for the 1335th. Right? And then thou go on to the end, and thou dost rest, and dost stand in thy lot at the end of the days. It can't be any more explicit. So when a Christian minister or a Christian comes up to you and reads out Matthew 24 or Luke 12 or Mark 13, and they say you can't know the day or the hour, you won't know when the end is coming, you can show them this video. You can tell them all this wisdom. No, we will and should know when the end is coming. God wants us to wait, to calculate, and to watch so that we can immediately let Jesus in, so that we won't be caught naked and by surprise. How could, if you know in general that Jesus is coming to your house one day, Jesus is your guest for Thanksgiving, okay? I think I know when Jesus is coming. Let's just say Thanksgiving 2023. I'm expecting Jesus to come. But you, the naysayer, have no clue when Jesus is coming, but you just know in general that he will be coming to your house at some point to have a meal. Well, one day you'll be lounging around naked in your house. He'll knock on the door. You'll be naked. Me, I'll know roughly when he's coming. Thanksgiving 2023. I'm just using this as a random example. Okay? Because it's like a feast, right? Jesus comes knocking on Thanksgiving. You know what? I was expecting him to come on Thanksgiving, so I'm nicely dressed, and I can immediately open the door for him. You're lounging around naked. You have no clue when he's coming. Jesus comes knocking. You're going to be scrambling to put your clothes on. And what does the verse say? Right? The verses literally say, be ready, be watching, lest he come by and catch you by surprise and you're naked. Okay? Where is the, if I didn't read that verse already, let me see if I can find that. Should be in, I think this might be it. No, it's not that one. It is... yeah, right here. Revelation 16:15. Lo, I do come as a thief. Happy is he who is watching and keeping his garments, that he may not walk naked, and they may see his unseemliness. Right? And you have other cases where one will be left at the mill and the other will be taken. Okay, how can you... Anyway, so enough said, right? I don't want to keep waffling on. You definitely can know when it is coming. It's coming in 2023. Everybody has to be watching and waiting and reformed and ready, because it'll happen. And if you don't know, you're going to be caught by surprise. That's quite simply it. Satan has deafened and blinded the churches for 2,000 years. And all the Christians right now are absolutely oblivious. None of the Christians expect a sudden, imminent end day. They expect to have 7 years of tribulation buffer, like a buffer zone, where they're going to have like some forewarning with a big spooky Antichrist guy ruling the earth and making people take a mark. They have all these theories. They think that there's going to be a big buffer zone that's going to make it obvious when the end is coming. But Jesus says in about half a dozen places, it'll be just like the day of Noah. People will be doing their everyday life activities and the end will suddenly arrive. He says that in like 4 places. And then in another 1 or 2 places where he says people will be saying peace and surety, and then there will be sudden destruction. So people, the Christians, will all be caught by surprise because they're not expecting it. They say, my Lord does delay to come, and they're going off. Nobody's perfect to start with, so we're all sinners. So you're saying, my Lord does delay to come, you're going off sinning. You're going to be caught by surprise, like those verses said. From Matthew 24, Luke 21, 12, whatever it was, and Mark 13. You'll be caught by surprise if you're not ready and watching. Okay, so there again, right? If you ask your teacher, for how long will we have these lessons for this semester? Is your teacher going to tell you 3.5 months if it isn't 3.5 months? No, it's 3.5 months. Okay, in this case, it's 3.5 times, 1,260 years in that case, for Daniel 12. And if you ask the teacher, okay, well, when is the final exam? And if the teacher lies to you, is he a good teacher? The teacher answered Daniel and said, it's going to be on the 1335th year. So that's not a lie. That's what God told you. So is God a liar? No, God's not a liar. He didn't just throw fake numbers around, right? He didn't. So anyways, I don't know how much more I could say, because I don't know what it's going to take to convince people. But, if the Christian church has had any common sense upon hearing this video and this evidence, they would feel a conviction to actually go out and try to solve the prophecy of Daniel. So I'll save you the time. I already did that hard work. It took about 20 years. Go watch the videos on my channel. I already did the maths. It's 2023. Okay? That's when it's going to be. But anyways, God bless you all, folks. Everybody take care.